This is Corey. I'm going to do a quick video here on adding files, text files, HTML files, etc. to the new IDG server for inclusion in a CMS page, which is a pretty common way to make pages in the CMS dynamic. It's something that's been available with the old CMS, but with the new system things change a little bit. So I'm going to go through a little bit of that. So first and foremost, we will have to talk just real briefly about RSync. I won't get into a lot of detail here about RSync, but this will give you at least a flavor for what's going on in the new system with RSync. So first and foremost, this is the Southern Region Transition to NID CMS Google page that I've set up, and there's some documentation on RSync here. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a small section here labeled RSync, and there you'll find the link to a document, options for configuring RSync under the NID CMS. So go ahead and open that up, and it's a pretty long document, pretty detailed, and this was actually put together mostly by Central Region folks, so I can't take credit for this, but it details the basics of the RSync as well as outlining 3 options for configuring RSync locally. So the only thing I'm really going to cover here is a little bit of this information at the top that defines some of the things with regards to modules and file types. So the table at the very top of the page outlines a few things. This is sort of the definition row here at the top. So the prefix is basically it corresponds to the module name. We've been dealing with modules in our CMS for RSync for quite a while. The next column here are extensions that are supported by each of those corresponding modules. And then the next column is some information talking about the validation or conversion that's performed when files are sent up to the IDG server. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a minute. The URL destination, so this helps you figure out what URL these things are corresponding to on the server. So for example here, let me go through the images all at once here in just a minute. And then the file system destination, which is not terribly important to what you're going to be doing, but this does outline where the files are actually placed on the server itself. So I'll go through just one of these, actually 2 of these real quick to show you a little bit about what happens when you rsync a file up. So if you're rsyncing up an image to the images module, this is the module that's used, and again I'll get in a little bit of details as to how this is done, but this is the module. These are the different image file types that are allowed right now, and we're always up for passing suggestions for opening this up further onto the IDG folks, so please pass those along if you come across that, but these are what are supported now. And so if you were able, trying to rsync a image up that doesn't fall into one of these categories, say a bitmap, BMP, it's going to rsync up, and then there's some post-processing that occurs on the IDG server that rejects it, and it won't make it to its final destination. So the next column actually defines that, spells that out for you. This is under the validation conversion performed section here, so it basically just says what I've told you. If the file image type doesn't match up with that specified or one that's allowed, it won't make it to the server. So as far as the URL destination go, the images are placed in a path very similar to what we have now. So for example, if I were the Brownsville office, BRO is the site ID, an image that's rsynced up would go to, in our case right now, before we're live, w2.weather.gov/images/BRO, and then the path to the file. And that's not only the file name itself, but you can actually specify a folder name while you're rsyncing, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So the other one, the one we're actually going to be interested in here with this short tutorial, is the CMS data, because these are the files that you can bring in and include in a CMS page. And there are a few different types, XML, text, HTML, and they're pretty tightly controlled, as you'll see under the validation conversion performed section here. So for example, with text files, it needs to be a text file, so any special characters, ampersands, become that, at ampersand, and these other conversions to HTML formats there. So if it's anything else, if it's HTML that's actually in a text file, the file will get rejected. If it's an XML in a text file, it'll get rejected, so you need to make sure to have the proper file extension to correspond with the data type within the file. Same thing with HTML files. There are some specifications with HTML that are special. So with HTML and HTML, there are very specific elements that are allowed. So it must be valid XML, so that means it has to be opening and closing brackets and everything like that are properly formatted, as well as at this point there are only these tags that are allowed. It's pretty limited, and we are working with the web technical team to try to flesh out some requests to IDG to maybe expand that, to flesh that out a little bit for you all. So if your file doesn't match up with the specifications here, the HTML and the HTML files will also be rejected. Now here in the URL destination, you'll notice it says these are not publicly accessible files. And that's the same condition as we have on our current CMS. If you RSync up a file into apps data, which is the module we use now for inclusion in CMS, you can't see those in a web browser. And similarly with the CMS data module on the new server, you can't see those in a browser either. They're simply there for inclusion in CMS pages and not meant to be viewable in a browser. So let's go ahead and try and RSync a file up to the server. So I'm just going to be using a test file here. This is a simple HTML file that doesn't even actually contain any HTML. So in this case I'm going to be using a file called test.html. In the file itself, all I do is say here is some HTML. So the way the RSync works is defined a little bit further down in the document. I won't get into too much detail here, but the very basics are the file name is actually used to specify where these files go. So in this case, when we run the RSync command, we have to actually rename our test.html file to try to place it in the proper module. So in this case, this is an image, and they're wanting the image to go into the CMS_images module. Then there's a plus sign in the file name, and then the file name itself. So in our case, we're going to be wanting to put our HTML file into the CMS data module. So keep that in mind when we look at the file name that I'm going to have to create. To do the RSync itself, you can manually do the RSync. This is a full command right here to RSync a ping image up to the server. And then if you go down further in the document, it defines a couple other different ways to do this RSync, but we're not going to get into those details right now. So back to our HTML file. Again, it's called test.html. I'm going to bring up a command terminal here real quick. Let me clear some of this stuff out here for you. I'm doing ls. I've got a few files in here, so let me remove one of those to avoid a little bit of confusion. Excuse me. So I've got a couple. One is the actual test HTML file that I just showed you that just had one sentence of text in it. To get it ready to RSync, I actually had to copy that test.html file to this file name. So we want it to go into the CMS data module. There's a plus sign, and then test.html. So that file name is used to place it in the CMS where it goes. If you try to RSync up a file without a module name and a plus, it's not going to go anywhere. So go ahead and copy that again. So there is our file that we're going to be RSyncing. I'm just going to remove the other one here just to keep it a little bit cleaner. So this is the file that we're going to be RSyncing. I'm going to go up in my history here just so I don't have to retype this whole command. So this is the RSync command itself. RSync. A few different flag items here that I won't bother to describe to you right now. That's a little bit beyond what we're looking at here right now. This is the file name itself that again defines the module, delimited by a plus sign, and then the name of the file itself, test.html. And then this is always going to be the same for every office, and then at the very end you specify your office 3-letter ID, and in my case it is SRH. So let me pop over to the CMS real quick and show you, hopefully, that I didn't put any data in there yet. So I'm going to go down to Site Configuration, Media Management, and once you RSync these things up, they're going to go into this data directory, and well, of course I've already got one there, so let me delete it. And right now my data directory is empty. There's nothing there. So I'm going to go back. I'm actually going to run this RSync command. And so there you'll see what's returned, builds the file list as to what you're specifying to be RSynced, says the file name, and specifies that it has been sent. Now this won't actually tell you if it makes it to the server, or it's going to make it to where it needs to be, because there will be that post-processing that occurs, so this won't give you any errors or anything like that, but it will let you know that the RSync occurred, it went to their server, and then it's awaiting processing on their end. which happens very quickly. So let's go ahead and pop back over here to the CMS. I'll hit refresh, and you can see that my test.html file is now up there. So now it's in the data directory, which is where files reside for inclusion in CMS pages. So now we can go into a CMS page and add the contents of that HTML, which could be dynamic if you continue to rsync and overwrite that file. So we're going to go to edit content. I'm just going to look at an old page. I've got an old page here called testing the width thing, in which I was doing something super amazing. And I've already got the URL set up here so we can see what changes occur once we include that file. And again, the test URL while you're building your sites is w2.weather.gov/site ID, 3-letter site ID, in my case SRH, and then the name of the CMS page, which is specified right up here. So you can see right now all I'd have is the word hi. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add that dynamic content just below the word hi. So similarly to what we do now, you go to Files, and it will have a list of all the files that are in that DAT folder, or that data folder, excuse me. And so I've only got one there. Go ahead and click that test.html and click OK. The CMS will insert some text that will help the post-processing or the processing display the data properly on your CMS page. You don't have to worry about editing or touching that. You can add text below that, or go to source and edit all sorts of stuff there as well, and just make it your own. And as you continue to rsync that test.html file up, keep on overriding it, this page will be dynamic and continue to adapt that content. So I'm going to click save. We'll head back to the testing width thing page, hit refresh, and there is the dynamic content. And just hopefully to prove that it is dynamic, I'll go back and edit that file, add just a little bit of text, go back to my terminal, do a quick copy of test.html, which is the file I just edited, to that same file name that specifies the module and the file name, and then rerun the rsync command. That should send that file back up again. Back over here and hit refresh, and it's gone ahead and added the dynamic content. So that's it for now.